Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, where the issues that shape your life meet the truth that sets you free. Across Utah, across the Republic, and around the world, welcome. I'm Trent Christensen, and this is KMMU. KMMU and Main Street Media stream live wherever you enjoy your streaming. We broadcast live on YouTube, Rumble, X, and on our website, kmmu.org. Now please join our host, John Twitchell. This is Let's Talk Utah's Talk with John.
Hello, folks. This is Talk with John here on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. And let's see if I can get us to some different settings. I'm trying to work with things, and hopefully you folks will forgive me. Let's see. I'm not going to go delete because that would be a bad idea. I don't want to delete something, but well, we'll figure it out. So, folks, this is Talk with John here on Main Street Media, Utah, KMMU.org. You can go to our Rumble, our YouTube, and Twitter pages and interact with us there. And right now, for the next few minutes, I have joining me Michael Letts of Invest USA. Okay, there's some big breaking news today. So on my X feed, I saw coming across with all the big announcements is I'm changing my speech at TPUSA from Roger Stone. Boy, big big things today, but I wasn't seeing what it was. Forgive me, I have a day job, so I'm not stuck in this all day long. That's what I do. And I went, who do I know that can give me an answer of what's happening and what's going on right now? And see if it's significant. Called Michael Letts of Invest USA. Now, what is Invest USA? Invest USA is a national nonprofit grassroots nonprofit that provides over 5,000, and I think it's higher than 5,000. 15,000 active shooter vests to law enforcement through Michael Letts, who is the CEO, founder, and president of Invest USA. So thank you for joining us for a few minutes. I really appreciate you being there. All right. So, Michael Letts, the two stories that you told me are kind of breaking and kind of big right now is that the House voted to block Democrat-led effort to force release of Epstein files to the public, as well as forced a vote to withhold Ghislaine Maxwell from appearing for a review of her before Congress.
Correct.
And I was like, Michael, I thought the Republicans, that's exactly what they would want. Bottom line is, in my opinion, it makes them look guilty big time. So now, but I'm going, it's the Democrats. Okay, let me be clear, folks. I am not part of the group of people that think Republicans can do no wrong. I am 100% a believer and know for a fact that there are many dirty Republicans. A guy that his name might rhyme with flimsy, Ram.
Pretty right on key. Yeah, right on key, John.
And there might be some reasons why I said flimsy and Ram in those words. Because something tells me he's not everything appears to be. You know, he may say he has kids, but never mind. We'll leave that alone. And he happens to be from a state close to South Carolina, where you're from, my friend. I'm just going to say, I'm going to leave, someplace close to South Carolina. All right. So, Michael Letts, tell me, what's going on with Ghislaine Maxwell? Because bottom line is, first of all, I don't know that I can trust her. I don't know that I can trust. I don't know that I could throw her much further than I could trust her. I am confident of that fact.
Right. Well, let's talk about what she has going on first of all, and what the ulterior motives would be. Obviously, she was sentenced to 20 years, for assisting in trafficking with children with Jeffrey Epstein. And now understand that she was part of the initial charge in 2018, which was they gave us a slap on the hand and said, quite frankly, this is shocking. They couldn't be prosecuted for anything else after that. It was a closed case in a discussion. Her argument was the same was Jeffrey's, but he never got to make it in court because he didn't live that long. She asked for the Court of Appeals to review the convictions on the basis of the promise of the government that the sentencing was all inclusive and it was just and no other charges could be brought up. She's been waiting on an appeal for some time for it to be heard what the position of the Department of Justice would be in hearing that appeal. Now, her point was she would be cooperative if she was given the opportunity to appeal. The Department of Justice came out this morning and said, we're going to oppose her appeal. It's going to be denied. The court will not hear her ability to argue as to whether the initial plea bargain was all inclusive or not. So she turned around and said, fine, I will make my knowledge known anyway. And if Congress will have me testify, appear before the House on the Oversight Committee, I will, under oath, say everything that I know, including names. And she did make a caveat. There are a lot of Democratic names, as well as others, but I will tell everything that I have the privilege of having known that has not been disclosed as of yet. She also took a little plug in there to say there's no list is not accurate. She put that out there. Now, understand when she puts this out here, Jeffrey made the same offer and it didn't work out too well for him. He didn't survive very long. So you've got to weigh this in balance. Yes, we don't, there's a serious question of her credibility, but also understand this is a serious matter for her to put that out there because there's already precedent. If you're going to turn on somebody, it didn't end too well for her boyfriend, for Jeffrey Epstein, and she's putting herself at great risk in making this plea. So Congress, as typical, you remember, they don't do anything fast. The Democrats, and we're still trying to figure this out politically, introduced a quick resolution. Well, let's invite her by all means and have her testimony released. In fact, don't do it behind closed doors. Have it available for the entire country to hear. And put the resolution on the floor. Interestingly enough, 211 Republicans voted to table it. 210 Democrats voted to push it through. So it only failed by one vote. But you said, what? I thought there were more members of Congress than that. There are quite a few of them that just didn't vote or non-voting. Voted present, but they didn't take a position either way. So it failed. So the big story is, why would Republicans not want information transparency to be made public? Now, that's the first thing.
Want to know.
Yes, that's the first thing. Now, the second thing that's occurred is, you remember there was the issue a week and a half ago with Pam Bondi and the FBI saying, hey, look, we've looked at the files that were placed on my desk. And of course, she debates that whether there was any names in those files or not. But we've looked at them, can't find anything worth prosecuting in there. We're going to go ahead and close the case. We've done all we can do. MAGA supporters, Republicans, I don't know when you say MAGA supporters, Americans in general were upset about that. Why? Because I thought there was something being hid from them. Then you had that same day, the president in his cabinet meeting, a reporter asked Pam Bondi about the issue, and he got frustrated and upset. Look, there's so much else going on. You still want to talk about this guy? He's a pervert. It's over. It's done. Now, I have spoken with him, and quite frankly, his intent was not that he didn't feel the issue needed to be settled. His frustration was, we're sitting on something that we don't seem to be able to gain traction with and get things released the way we're supposed to. I've already ordered it to be released. It's being hung up. Let's talk about some of the other issues now and figure out how we're going to handle this later. But that's not the way the American public took it. The American public
Right.
took it as, oh, you don't care about our kids anymore. And they went nuts. And so for the last week and a half, there's been tremendous pressure all across the country. People have been in uproar over this issue. So the president has come out today and said, no, let's clarify the issue. A number of matters. I care about these kids. We're going to do everything we can to go on ahead and put the full transcripts that we have control over. Here's the key pushback that we're beginning to understand now. We're going to release the records that we have found, that we have control over. We're not saying this is all the records or that there's not other stuff available that we can't access. Now, what would that mean? Well, here comes an interesting thing that occurred today as well. Alan Dershowitz has come out now. You remember he was actually, the famous attorney. He was actually named in the book, in this little list, this contact book, etc. And of course, he said, "Hey, I just because my name's there doesn't mean I did anything." And he fought to prove his innocence, and actually succeeded in doing so. But here's what happened in his doing that. The victims, the girls, got tired of waiting on criminal indictments and sued civilly. You remember they sued Prince Andrews for millions, et cetera, et cetera. Many of them didn't go to trial. They actually settled out of court. But you had
Prince Andrews settled out of court for
you are correct.
Millions.
You are correct. You are 60 million. You are correct. So, but here's what you had. You had, because it was in the judicial system, even though it was in the civil side, you had activist judges that were saying, okay, now we've got to protect the identity of these victims. Now that sounds good, and we agree wholeheartedly with that. But what they didn't tell you was they allowed anybody to claim victim status and get their records sealed as well. So here's the problem that we're having. You've got the judicial with their hand in the cookie jar now, saying we're going to block, certain files from being released. You have the president saying, I want it all released so that we have full disclosure. You have Congress saying, I don't know that we want to release this or not. No, let's wait, let's hold. So you've got a colossal mess up here on this situation. The one thing I want to leave with the listeners is this. You have the support of the president and his administration. He's reactivated that. He's re-engaged to make sure that we get as much out as possible, as quickly as possible. But what does that mean? That's anybody's guess, John. And based on the information I just told you, a lot of files could be protected by the court. A lot of files could have already been destroyed. A lot of files could be subject to misinterpretation. So you can see that this is how big this issue is. Then you've got Elaine saying, I'll help you figure it all out. But of course, is she going to survive long enough to do that? And will they give her the opportunity? You say, well, let her speak. You remember she's in prison. She can't just walk over to a microphone and say, I'd like to give a speech, please turn the microphone on. So all this has to be sorted through, and that's why it's the top story at the moment.
So are they going to bring her out? Are they going to bring her before Congress in a prison jumpsuit and handcuffs? I don't think so. Yeah, I'm sure she wants to get out.
Well, you have to look at why would she be involved today? Because knowing that she had just lost her appeal, basically she's stuck there for that 20-year sentence unless something else develops. And that's why I'm certain she had to weigh it out. If I say I'm willing to testify, will they knock me off? Well, I'm in here for 20 years. I'll be knocked off. I'll be dead before I can get out of here anyway. So she's taking the dice and rolled them. Let's see what happens.
How old is she?
She's in her 60s.
Yeah. So there's a very good chance. So there's a very good chance she will be.
Put it this way: if she gets out, she won't have much life left when she's out, and there's a good chance she may not, just out of natural causes, not make it through the end of her sentence anyway.
Well, or Jeffrey Epstein happens.
Yeah, well, that's always a big possibility, especially now that you said, hey, I know, and it's not just, there's a lot of files. And Alan Dershowitz backed this up today. There's a lot of people that are being protected.
Yes, Alan. So I want to say I heard that earlier, even maybe as late as last week. Alan Dershowitz come out and say, when Ben Shapiro has been hitting this really hard that, there's nothing to see here. I trust Kash Patel. I trust Dan Bongino. There's nothing to see here. Okay, maybe you do trust them. Maybe they've been shown that there is nothing, or what? So one of the key phrases I remember them both using is, From what I have seen, there is nothing there. There has been nothing that's been brought to my attention. Well, great. What has not been brought to your attention is what I'm curious about.
You know, you're exactly right, John. It's very astute of you to say that. Notice they're saying only from what I have seen,
It's only
not from
because
what
someone
all
like
the
Michael
files.
Letts, it's only because someone like Michael Letts has told me to read in between the lines that when they say something like that.
Well, you picked up on that very well, John. I'm very proud of you. And you know, one of the things I'm proud of the American people, John, because I think even the president kind of felt like, hey, you know, if I kind of say, yeah, this is important, but we don't have time for it now, we need to move on to other things because we don't haven't sorted through it all yet. When the American people said, no, I realize you're our commander in chief and we love you to death, but no, we're drawing the line in the sand. This one is going to get settled. We are going to know what happened and we're going to have transparency. I'm glad the American people took that position and pushed back.
Well, bottom line is, even though he's the president, I think he's been the greatest president of my lifetime so far. You still are my employee.
Correct.
My employee. You might be worth billions, then hand in your resignation.
You're exactly right.
You're my employee, and I expect you to be there and taking care of the American public. So I'm going to give you my quick synopsis on this. I told you I'd only keep you on for a few minutes, and we've gone over that already. This is my opinion. Why do I think so many people care so much about this issue? To me, this is the biggest issue. Why is it the biggest issue? Because you have power players that are willing to do this. It's being used as blackmail. I firmly believe, and so it was interesting how whatever his name, former Israeli prime minister, came out and said, "We, you know, he's not part of us. He's not part of Israeli intelligence. He was never part of Mossad." Well, guess what? That's what happens all the you know, people that work for Mossad, people that work for the CIA are paid by some other cutout that's paid by some other cutout that receives money from US aid. That's how it happens. But yes, CIA is actually in control of that stuff. Or Mossad, same thing. So the bottom line is, it may not be, of course he wasn't official Mossad. Of course he wasn't official MI6. But I guarantee you, they all knew what was going on. They were all getting that information.
I guarantee you this, John. They all had their hands in helping put the organization, the plan together. Because as we've talked about before, I mean, this was a massive operation. And you remember that Jeffrey Epstein didn't come from money. So who came up with the billions, not millions, billions of dollars to buy all the mansions, all the recording equipment? Why would you have recording equipment in every one of the rooms, in every one of the mansions all across the country, if you were just renting or buying your own porn subscription for your, you know, I mean, it makes absolutely no sense.
No way.
And then, of course, you had an island, you had a jet. I mean, this is a major operation, and somebody had to fund it.
So let me tie the circle. This is a spiritual thing.
No question.
We are letting, so what bothers me is that we continually hear about the young women that were raped. We don't hear about the young men that were raped. And I believe that there were satanic rituals conducted at these events. And I believe that it was satanic ritual abuse. Not maybe every situation, but a number of them.
No question. And I believe we have the evidence of it. And I believe that it's being withheld, quite frankly. And that is what is so frustrating. I think even the president, where I'm defending the president in this sense, I think he's kind of realized that I realize you're the president of the United States, but just because you're the president doesn't mean you can snap your fingers and everybody does exactly what you tell them to do. There is so much evil, John, going on, stabbing behind the back, hiding things, etc., that we have really, as you said, this is the biggest issue because it circles around to this entire war of good versus evil.
And if it doesn't get taken care of, we're in deep trouble. Very deep trouble if it doesn't get taken care of and it doesn't get resolved. So so let me be completely clear on this. Why did Israel fall? Why was it taken over in biblical times? It's because the people became so wicked. And
Correct.
they were doing things like this. They were sacrificing children. They were doing things along these lines. And the bottom line is that's why it happened. And it was because the level of wickedness. And if we as American people are not willing to call out those type of things, then we will lose God's grace, and our nation as we know it will be toast. I'm going to let you go ahead and make your final give your final thoughts, Michael Letts.
Let me
And
give 2 quick seconds on what you're saying, John.
what's that?
I'll give you 2 quick seconds to tie it all in. Here's a couple other quick headlines. We're investigating John Brennan now. We're investigating James Comey. John Brennan, we now discovered, gave the passports
James
to the
Comey's daughter
terrorists.
also happens to be the prosecutor of all these.
That is correct.
With that, sorry, go ahead.
So I'm glad you brought that up. What you're saying, of course, and we should have to say it like it is, John. John Brennan's a devout Muslim, yet he gave the passports for the 9/11 terrorists, the pilots that drove the planes in to the buildings. So here's the point. What you're beginning to see now is we are grasping this whole surface, this whole spear of evil that is trying to destroy us from within. And it's going to be a big battle because, trust me, they don't want to be exposed. They want to regain control. And so, if ever there was a time we need revival in this country, it's now, because we're in the greatest battle we've ever had versus evil versus good versus evil.
I'm going to get really crazy here. So the Jews and the Muslims both have within their scripture, shall we say, within their canonized material, that it is okay to lie to those that are not of their group.
Correct.
And it's okay to lie and say that you are telling the truth and, oh, no, I believe just like you. That it's totally okay and they will not be held against it. That's not in the Christian ethos. So the bottom line, be careful with who you trust. Be careful
Amen
and
to
trust and
that.
talk with John. So
Make sure you research it yourself.
Michael, well, research it yourself and pray about it too,
Amen.
Because let's be clear. I've said this before. Talk with John is a very sinful man. I'm trying to get God's grace. I'm trying to be a good man. But the bottom line is, even I have not my best days. But the bottom line is, it's not part of my ethos to go and say it's okay for me to misrepresent and lie. So I can be held accountable. What's said on this show, up above.
That's right. We all are.
And speaking of which, I didn't give out my show mantra and my show prayer. So, folks, that's it. That's in my show prayer. That's why I put it in there. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to my Father above. Then where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. That's why I bring on someone like Michael Letts, folks.
Thank you, John. God bless you. God bless America. A lot going on, folks. Be in prayer first, and second of all, stay informed. That's what you do, John. Keep up the good work. We love you for it, brother.
Take care, my friend. God bless you, brother. And we'll be
You take
talking
care.
to you hopefully in 2 weeks. See you, my friend.
Till then. All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. All right, folks, that was Michael Letts of Invest USA. So grateful for him joining us today. Appreciate him being here on very short notice. So, and when I say very short notice, I think I called him up a half hour before showtime. Maybe it was like 45 minutes. But the bottom line is he was willing to come on at really short notice, and I want to say thank you so much to him. All right, Michael, I hope he has a wonderful week. Folks, okay, so I just want to dive down into this just a little bit more. To me, this is a huge, huge, huge concern that the Republican Party was willing to vote against if they're willing to vote against having Epstein come before them, that they're not willing to release the black book. Now, here's my question. Epstein was charged on conspiracy, a RICO case. And it was never just stated that Epstein was the only one. Where's the conspiracy? That's one of the reasons why she, her appeal was, hey, there is no conspiracy, supposedly, according to what was released by um, the Department of Justice. So, nuts. Absolutely nuts. I want to quickly hit this article. White House counsel now investigating and is expected to review over 1 million documents. The National Archives has already handed over more than 27,000 documents to investigators. The White House counsel is working on the Justice Department in this AutoPen investigation. Could there have been that many documents? Donald Trump, I'm going to play something from, actually, I won't be playing it from Donald Trump, but Donald Trump had on saying that he goes, I don't think that Joe Biden had the foggiest idea what was going on. All right, so folks, I am going to, and I got a really from someone, but I'm not sure. Well, I'm guessing someone's watching the show. Not sure what the really means. And oh, sorry, we missed you on the chat. It says, who in the double? Yeah. Who in the H is John? I'm just some guy. Just some guy, no big deal, that has an opinion and has a thought process. That's who I am. All right. Looking forward to having, hopefully, David Pyne join me. I am going to, let's see. I'm going to reach out to David Pyne. Now, I don't have my producer today, and often my producer is helping me with that. Let's just see if he happened to have joined. Well, John Jonas, you're welcome, but the Joel Skousen interview was a week ago. All right, so to David Pyne, and what's kind of interesting is how Joel Skousen and David Pyne have many similarities, but they have some different thoughts. So I love having both of these on as guests. So David, are you going to be able to join me? Let's see. Are you going to be able to join me here in a few minutes? And who knows, he might actually be there. So forgive me, there's a couple of screens. I'm working with a few screens, just trying to make sure who's in, and he is not in at the moment. So I'm sure he will be here shortly. Let's go to, I want to read a little bit further into this article. Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell has her appeal for a review of her conviction denied by the U.S. government Supreme Court to rule on issue. G. Maxwell grew up with a silver spoon in her mouth as the youngest daughter of British media mogul and alleged Mossad spy Robert Maxwell. Now, if I remember correctly, I can't remember if it's the Mount of Olives or Mount Sinai that Robert Maxwell was buried on. Bottom line is, you don't have small potatoes. You don't have some media mogul that is small potatoes that is buried on that. They only do that for high honors. And my guess is he was CIA. He probably was the one that brought in Epstein to this. So let's go ahead, though, and change. Actually, I'll let David Pyne share a few thoughts. We're bringing on David Pyne right now, and I'll be introducing him a little bit further. But David Pyne, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you being here.
Hey, John, great to be with you.
All right. So, David, do you have any thoughts on this whole mess when it comes to the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein? There is no supposed list. There's no, there isn't thousands of hours, probably hundreds of thousands of hours of video of high-level people. What are your thoughts when it comes to that? That has kind of broken over the last 3 weeks or so.
Well, I think it's a tremendous cover-up. It's a corruption on a scale I'd never thought I'd ever see from the Trump administration. And Trump's first term was pretty much scandal-free. I mean, the Democrats invented scandals, but he didn't. There was no wrongdoing on his part at all. And now we see this. You know, he promised to be transparent. He promised to release the Epstein list. Attorney General Pam Bondi said it was on her desk. She was just reviewing it, and she was getting ready to release it. That was in February. So 5 months later, we're now told by the DOJ and FBI that there is no Epstein list. You know, it just magically disappeared. It existed, and then it was on the Attorney General's desk, and then it just magically flew away, and it doesn't exist anymore.
And then she had phase one roll out. What happened to phase two? Is phase two saying, oh, by the way, no black book, nothing along those lines, no Epstein list, it all disappeared. Is that phase two? Because she hasn't officially declared it as phase two. But if there's a phase one, typically there's at least a phase two.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing, unfortunately, is that Trump may have been blackmailed by Israel. Israel, you know, said he's on the list. We all know he's on the list. That doesn't mean he slept with any plane. He was on the plane with Epstein. He was good buddies with Epstein. They liked to party together. When they were, you know, he was married to Melania, and Melania would come to some of the events, dance around, and you know, he doesn't deny that. And then he subsequently turned against Epstein and testified on behalf of one of the witnesses against him in his criminal trial in 2006. So there was a falling out based on real estate. I encourage all of your viewers to watch the Candace Owens expose about the whole Epstein ordeal and Trump's connections. Again, he's not believed to have done any wrongdoing in terms of, you know, sexual offenses or anything like that. But clearly he's very, you know, he's very uptight about it. He was asked about it at a cabinet event meeting, and he got very defensive. You know, the body language was through the roof, and he was just like, why are you talking about this? You know, so what if I promised to release it, and now I decided to burn it or destroy it? You know, you shouldn't care about that. Care about, you know, the disaster victims in Texas. And you know, whenever you see that any member of the Trump administration get all defensive, you know they're trying to cover something up.
Well, I would say pretty much with any administration, they're trying to cover something up.
Exactly.
When you see them get defensive. So to me, I don't know that the man could look more guilty.
Well, yeah, as I said, I mean, this is a corrupt cover-up. That's probably as far as it goes. There may have been some kind of malfeasance on the part of President Trump. We don't know. I don't think we can assume that. But what we know for a fact is he's covering it up. That the list exists. There's, you know, I mean, there was up to 1,000 victims. We know there's at least 250, probably close to 1,000, you know, child rape victims, most of whom are underage, perhaps not all, teenage girls that were raped and abused. And so far, we only have the ringleader, who's, you know, obviously he didn't rape all the girls. You know, there was a lot of other people. Reportedly, this was an Israeli Mossad, you know, intelligence honeypot operation where they'd get President Clinton and a whole bunch of other U.S. leaders to sleep with these girls, and then they'd have all the recordings, and then they're like, well, you better support Israel. We're going to release this. And, you know, that kind of worked pretty well with Bill Clinton. And, you know, what does Israel have on Trump? Why is he bombing Iran? No other U.S. president in history was willing to authorize Israel to bomb Iran, let alone to bomb Iran itself and risk the lives of millions of Americans in doing so. So clearly, you know, Israel appears to have something on Trump. They seem to have blackmailed him into covering up the Epstein list. And I think, maybe the answer is much simpler. Maybe it's just that Israel doesn't want that list published because then they can't blackmail people. Once it's seen the light of day, the usefulness of their ability to blackmail it disappears.
It does lose that. Okay, so something that I want to hit on. There's a couple things that I want to hit on. Since you're willing to go down this rabbit hole with me, and I definitely want to get to the other topics that we talked about having, and it does involve Israel, happens to involve Israel. So here's something that I want to cover with you and get your thoughts on. Ben Shapiro is saying, hey, nothing to see here. Now, I'm going to share some thoughts that I've had with you about Ben Shapiro very recently that have come to my mind. Ben Shapiro actually came to national level prominence before he was 18 years old. Now, let me be clear. I think Ben Shapiro is many, 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 many times more intelligent than I am. He's probably Manza level intelligence. He probably has an off the charts IQ. If I remember correctly, he graduated from one of the top people in his class in Harvard Law School. And I want to say he graduated like cum laude from UCLA. But bottom line is, someone that has, and I want to say he released a book before he was 18 years old. I probably, this is just coming to me as you and I are talking. But the bottom line is, I think he was Mossad clear back then. Now, John, and he has said, he's like, Mossad doesn't operate in the United States. Of course they don't. Just like the CIA doesn't operate in the United States, and just like MI6 doesn't operate in the United States. Here's what they do, folks. They have some cutout company that's paid by some cutout company that's paid by somebody like USAID, right? So there's not a direct CIA. They're not getting a check written out from the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. Those stars that are on the wall of the Central Intelligence Agency represent Central Intelligence agents' deaths, but they don't give a name because they can't give a name. Why? Because the CIA doesn't operate that way, and that's the way intelligence agencies don't operate that way. So Ben Shapiro has come out and said, I believe, and a former prime minister, and Ben Shapiro has mentioned this, former prime minister so-and-so said that the Mossad has, that Jeffrey Epstein was not a Mossad agent. Well, I'm willing to believe that he was not receiving an official check from the Mossad. I would buy that. But it's that same situation that I told you. He's paid by some cutout who's paid by the Mossad, and happened to have a former prime minister come into his place more than once, and more than one prime minister come into his place, in fact. So the bottom line is do I think the intelligence agencies are behind Jeffrey Epstein or involved with Jeffrey Epstein, very much know what he was doing? The answer is clearly yes. I don't see how you can not believe that. And they've got to do everything to sink this, because if the truth of light is shined on this, yes, they lose their power, but also then the public becomes aware of how corrupt it is. And there might actually be some people that would stand up and say, this needs to all come down. Because I think it's the lynch. If that was to come out, it would cause the House of Cards to fall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Israel doesn't behave as a U.S. ally. They blackmail our politicians to do their bidding, to fight their wars the last 20 years. I mean, I'm saying this as a lifelong supporter of Israel. So I don't say this with any glee. I'll always support the right of Israel to exist in legitimate self-defense. But I think a lot of Netanyahu's policies have been, trying to get the U.S. involved in World War III with Iran, trying to, mass murder innocent women and children in Gaza, for no reason really. Hamas has been willing to, essentially surrender, disarm, even, lose power. But Netanyahu has a plan to establish, greater Israel and try to establish Israeli regional hegemony. And, in terms of spy operations, I've known for a while now as someone who who's been following things for the last quarter century or so, that Israel has been consistently one of the top 3 intelligence threats to the United States in terms of the number of spies. I mean, we're probably their number 1 spy target. It's not Iran. They probably have more. I would bet my house that they have more intelligence assets here in the U.S. than anywhere else. I mean, they have APAC. Basically should be registered under FARA as foreign agents that contribute. Literally, I don't know, nearly $1 billion, probably nearly $1 billion a year, and it's probably paid for by U.S. taxpayers. I mean, we give them $3+ billion a year, mostly aren't in terms of military technology development. I was involved in that when I worked in the Missile Defense Agency 20 years ago, and they get to keep all the technology. They don't share any with the U.S. military. That's why they. For a while,
so what do you mean by, David? You just said something really, really key and really powerful if people understand. But I think some people may not have quite understood. So you said they get to keep some of that information. What do you mean by they get it? So we give them whatever missile systems. What do you mean by they get to keep it and don't share it with us? Well, if it was ours already, I know there's a piece there, but I want you to explain that.
Yeah, so when I worked in the Missile Defense Agency, and this is all unclassified, we developed joint missile defense technology, mainly in the Arrow system. They have like 3 different main systems: Iron Dome, Arrow. I think David Slane. Arrow is, I think it was the Arrow 3 that we worked on, and that's an element of their missile defense system. Essentially, we developed that technology with them, with 100%, paid for by U.S. taxpayers. And then they wouldn't share the technology. So they did the agreements in a way that only, we would co-develop the technology, but we weren't allowed to use it for the U.S. military. And then on top of that, they've been selling, all of our state-of-the-art U.S. military technology. We give them to the Chinese, the communist Chinese, for 25 years. It may predate that. It might be in the 90s, but I've been following that as well. And of course, they almost sunk the USS Liberty and killed or wounded 200 sailors. So I'm not saying this. I'm not saying I don't support Israel. I'm just saying that they don't. Of all of our supposed allies, they don't act as an ally. It's a very one-sided relationship. So the U.S. should not feel compelled to fight Israel's wars, to sacrifice tens of thousands of American lives on their behalf, and risk World War III. Because Netanyahu has a bone to pick with Iran.
I would concur with that statement, David. Let me be clear try to be a little clear on this. To me, what is Israel? I've heard a lot of people say, well, what is Israel? I think that's a really good question. What is Israel? What is the nation of Israel? There is a spiritual, biblical nation of Israel. And then there is Israel, the country. Israel was made up of the tribe of Judah and Gad and Ephraim and Jacob. Well, not Ephraim, but of Jacob. So there were 12 sons of Israel, and they had 12 tribes. The tribe of Dan. So there's a lot of tribes that Israel never speaks about and never references. It's all just the tribe of Judah, meaning the Jews. So to me,
well, it's actually Judah and Benjamin. So Judah and Benjamin came to that. Those are the 2 tribes that came to be known as Judah, and subsequently the Jews, essentially.
Right, but what I'm saying, so I'm going way back, right? Historical reference. The tribe of Israel, my understanding. Okay, so am I wrong that there were 12 tribes of Israel?
No, that's correct.
Okay, so there was northern Israel, and there was the southern tribes of Israel.
Yeah, so there were actually 2 nations after around 775 BC. Israel was actually the northern state, and then the kingdom of Judah. So Israel was actually destroyed by the Assyrians. And then Judah was partially destroyed by Babylonians and then subsequently repopulated and occupied by the Romans.
So I'm going to say, to me, from my perspective, is yes, is the modern state of Israel actually part of the becoming of biblical, the return of Israel? I think so. But I don't have to support Netanyahu to support Israel, in my opinion. And let's be clear. So when it biblically speaking, what does supporting someone mean? Sometimes it means withholding everything from them because they're so stuck in their sinful ways that if I assist them in any way, shape, or form, I'm bringing sin upon myself. So that's what I think is really important for the United States to do, is go, okay, what can we do to support them in keeping their covenants, becoming the covenant people that they're supposed to be, versus causing possibly World War III to happen. So let's get into that. So there were the three topics I shared with you, and actually, please feel free to answer if you want to make a comment on what I just said, or we can get into it.
Yeah, I mean, if any of your viewers have seen the interview between Ted Cruz and Tucker Carlson, I mean, that's really the focus. It's Ted Cruz makes the comment, well, the Bible commands us to support Israel, and then Tucker counters like, so you think the Netanyahu regime is we're commanded by Jesus to support the Netanyahu regime that what Israel didn't even exist 2,000 years earlier is when we were told to support Israel. I mean, so you're right. Supporting Israel is supporting God's people, trying to share the gospel with them, the gospel of Jesus Christ, convert the Jews to Christianity, it's really humanitarian support, I would argue. So we are duty bound to provide humanitarian support to the Jewish people, wherever they might be, and not just the Jews, but people that you've identified as members of the House of Israel, which include the Gentiles and a whole bunch of countries. So,
yes.
It is not Israel state specific.
So where did the 10 tribes go, right? Where did they go? Probably north. All right. Okay, so let's get into some of the topics that we want to cover. I'm trying to find that tweet that I sent out to you.
So there's a comment I'd like to address from Joe from Florida. So I'm just reading here. So he's asking like what the strategy should be that Trump should have with Israel, because I've made very clear that I think it was a huge mistake to bomb Iran, and that it's important to prioritize our interests. And in terms of what our interests should be peace with all of our nuclear adversaries. So our number one way to protect the U.S. isn't actually military strength. It's not even a nuclear deterrent. It's having peace with all of our enemies. So Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, those are the four countries that can wipe us off the face of the earth. So we don't want to be attacking nuclear armed countries. We don't want to be attacking countries with super EB satellites orbiting over the U.S. that can just, kill 250 million Americans in a year. And so does that require us to even trade with these countries? It does, it doesn't require us to not have sanctions on Iran, for example. I've always supported maximum sanctions, economic pressure on Iran. I definitely wouldn't support any regime change operations, but in terms of weakening them economically, I think that's a great idea. But it does require us to work together to find, to avoid military conflicts. So that's why I was so perturbed by Trump's decision to attack Iran. There was no imminent national security threat. Iran has been a nuclear power, in my estimation, for probably at least 8 years.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by a nuclear power? Please, let's be clear on that. I want the audience to understand.
Yeah, so Iran purchased 4 nuclear weapons from the former Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan in 1992. That was reported in the Deseret News and multiple other outlets. They likely they did not obtain operational control of those weapons, Russian tactical nukes. However, they likely were able to reverse engineer them. I mean, no less an authority than Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu predicted in '95 that Iran would have nukes by 2000 unless we bomb the crap out of them. And we didn't bomb them for 30 years later, so they've had plenty of time to develop nuclear weapons. They were, according to Dr. Peter Pyne, the head of the late great founder of my organization, the Task Force on National Homeland and Security that I helped lead. Iran was only 3 months away from developing nukes in 2003. So they've had all that time, 22 years. They're 3 months away from developing nukes. We're told that they're the most evil country in the world, right? The most evil regime, which isn't true. China's much more evil in terms of mass murders, and North Korea is much more evil. But Iran is a murderous regime, and I've always opposed their Islamist terror regime. Doesn't mean I want to try to destroy them or fight a war with them, but they're an enemy, and but the way to counter them is it's not militarily, it's through economic might. And to me, every evidence that I've seen indicates that they have had nuclear weapons. In that 22 years where they were 3 months away, they've had plenty of time to develop nuclear weapons. There's no, anyone, unless you believe that they're a peaceful regime that loves peace and hates nuclear weapons, you have to believe they have nukes. And the idea that, parroted by the Trump administration and the Netanyahu regime in Israel, that they don't have nukes and they're only 2 weeks away, it's just ridiculous. There's no evidence that there was an imminent Iranian threat. There was no evidence that Iran was planning to use nuclear weapons against the U.S. No evidence they were planning to share them with non-state actors such as terrorist groups. And so this whole war was being fought on, I think it was fought on false pretenses.
Well, folks, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I kind of want to reset things real quickly from the standpoint of I want to say thank you, and I want to mention that you are watching this on KMMU.org or one of our streaming platforms. So you can go to KMMU.org, and you can see how you can go about viewing us, either whether it be on X, Rumble, our X account, Rumble account, or YouTube. Feel free to view this on any one of those channels. So thank you for being here, those that are here right now. And let's go ahead. I'm going to pull up the chats. So we've had let's see what we have on a few of these. In fact, there's some questions that are coming through. We may get to all of them, we may not, and heaven knows that there's been some trolls on here lately too. But we will get to some of your comments. So I really wanted to mention that. And let me do a better job of introducing David Pyne, because I just brought him on real fast and didn't introduce who he was. The bottom line is I definitely want to share with the audience a little bit about David Pyne. So David T. Pyne Esquire is a former U.S. Army Combat Arms and Headquarters staff officer who is in charge of armaments cooperation with the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Americas from 2000 to 2003. With an MA in National Security Studies from Georgetown, he is a former president and current deputy executive director of Task Force on National and Homeland Security. He recently served as defense and foreign policy advisor to former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. He has also co-authored the best-selling new book, Catastrophe Now, America's Last Chance to Avoid an EMP Disaster, and his new book, Restoring Strategic Deterrence, will be published sometime around July 2025. He serves as the editor of the Real War newsletter at dpyne.substack.com. That's dpyne.substack.com, and previously served as contributor to the National Interest. And you can find out more about him by please going to his X account. America, the word first is spelled out, Con, C-O-N. So obviously Con for conservative. and you can find out more about him that way. So, David, once again, thanks for joining me today. So let me mention the 3 topics that we want to cover, but I also want to play something that I heard on the Daily Wire. And because I don't have Dwayne here to help us out, I'm going to play it from my phone, and let's hopefully you can hear it. But a comment from I wanted to get your comment on from Donald Trump. So, but the topics that I had talked to you about coming on and hitting was the bombing of Iran. Could it lead to World War III? Will a ceasefire last with Israel and Iran, and Trump's actions to escalate and unnecessarily prolong war with Ukraine? So before we go any further, I do want to play this real quickly, and let's see if you can hear it. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, if you would.
I think this is a chance of getting peace. Europe has a lot of spirit for this war. They really...
Are you able to hear that?
Yep.
Okay, so let me see if I can back that up just a smidgen. But he's talking about Ukraine and the war in Ukraine.
Way to force Putin to come to the table. Here he is yesterday. I think this is a chance of getting peace. Europe has a lot of spirit for this war. They really think it's a very, very important thing to do, or they wouldn't be doing it. Look, they're agreeing to just, they're paying for everything. We're not paying anymore. Now, White House officials are quick.
So what are your thoughts on that comment?
Well, I think President Trump is, he's wanted to go down in history as Biden 2.0. He's regurgitating all the, talking points of the Biden administration. He's, jettisoned his noble, courageous peace plan to make peace with Russia. He's, arming Ukrainians to prolong the war as long as possible. And even worse, he's, well, let me first address the sanctions, secondary sanctions he's talking about. Those, 500% secondary sanctions on Chinese goods, could raise the price of life-saving pharmaceuticals by 500%. It would greatly increase the cost of military procurement. We have so many Chinese parts in our weapon systems. It's going to make inflation go up. Now, granted, he said that after those 50 days, if Russia refuses to accept Ukraine's ceasefire terms, which they've already said are unacceptable to them, he'll only raise it to 100% tariffs on 85% of the world's countries that trade with Russia. Some of those countries will, for sure, give into the threat and cut off trade with Russia, but the big ones won't. Russia, China and India, those countries are extremely dependent on Russia as a military ally. India's been, their security rests on their alliance with Russia. Without their alliance with Russia, China might invade them. So that's a very important alliance. And China, of course, is very dependent on Russia for its security. If Russia were an enemy or even a neutral country, it would greatly undermine China's world order. So, that's going to really backfire on the U.S. economy. If sustained, it could cause a U.S. economic recession and doom our chances to to maintain control of Congress in the 2026 election. And of course, if we lose the House, Trump's guaranteed to have a third impeachment. So a lot of downside for him on that one. You really just have to be a real fool to support that. It's so sad to see Trump go down that road. More importantly, though, are the reports I'm hearing of Trump considering the provision of JASSM cruise missiles, which are launched from Ukrainian F-16s. By the way, big revelation for your show today. I haven't seen it reported anywhere else. General Jack Keane, former Army Vice Chief of Staff, stated earlier this afternoon on Fox News that some of the Ukrainian F-16s are piloted by former U.S. F-16 pilots, U.S. Air Force F-16 pilots. So we're talking about putting cruise missiles on those planes that are likely to be used for deep strikes against Russia, and the ones pulling the triggers are U.S. combat vets, U.S. Air Force pilots.
So basically, former, I forget, Merck Merc type military people. So,
well, yeah, I mean, you could call them mercenaries, you could call them Ukrainian Foreign Legion, or simply, just U.S. military advisors that we hired to pilot the planes. I mean, it's very possible that those are U.S. defense contractors or U.S., whatever you want to call it, paid for by the U.S., certainly out of U.S. funding, and they're U.S. combat pilots, that they're not active duty anymore. They might be retired. They could be retired colonels or lieutenant colonels or, retired or former majors, pulling the trigger to bomb Russian military sites, maybe even Russian nuclear arsenal, just like, the Operation Spiderweb attacks on June 1st, where the Ukraine decimated a dozen Russian nuclear bombers, which are about almost 10% of their nuclear bomber fleet. Just imagine if the U.S. personnel were involved in direct strikes against the Russian Federation.
Well, it sounds like we're pretty close to being there. Okay, so I want to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit more, but I also want to mention you put out a tweet earlier. I can't remember exactly when it was, and I'm having a hard time finding it right at this exact second. But you shared that okay, it was a post that you did on July 14th, so just yesterday, about who's surrounding Donald Trump. But so here's my question. How long do you think before this becomes a full-blown war? And as I shared with Donald Trump's comments, he's basically making a statement that NATO or Europe is willing to take this to a hot war. Is there any evidence of that fact, or at least they're willing to do it? How long should we be playing this dangerous game, and when do you expect, if it keeps on going that way, when is it going to go hot? Because our armaments are being depleted. Russia's replacing in 1 month what we're losing in a quarter of all of NATO is losing in 3 months.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, NATO's own leaders have said that Russia's producing more armaments and munitions than all of NATO, including the U.S. And they're producing in a year or 3 months what we produce in a year, essentially combined. 32 member states. So that's a big threat. But then Russia is the premier cyber power, so they could take us out with a massive cyber attack. That would be the most likely possibility for World War III. And they could do that. They could defeat the U.S. and NATO on day one of the war. I mean, they're not going to fight the U.S. the same way they're fighting Ukraine, which is essentially decimating them on the front line. And they're going to conduct a massive catastrophic attacks on the U.S. Could be cyber, could be super EMP, could be nuclear, tactical nuclear, strategic nuclear. So they have a lot of different options. But one thing I forgot to mention is that Trump is reportedly considering, shipping Tomahawk missiles with ranges of over 1,500 miles to Ukraine. And that's the exact reason, reportedly, that Russia decided to invade Ukraine.
That was I just heard the report. Let me be clear. I just heard talk with John, just heard that report today. That was something that he was willing to do. So that may have been like a yesterday thing or very recent, but you're right. He's considering giving the Ukraine offensive weapons, was the very specific term.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the ATACMS missiles that we considered, pushing us to the brink of World War III, I mean, the ATACMS missiles have max ranges of about 300 miles. So we're talking about JASSM cruise missiles that have ranges of about 585 miles. Then we're talking about Tomahawks with ranges of over 1,550 miles. So, this is like World War III on steroids in terms of pushing Russia's red line. And the thing about Russia's red line is, we keep crossing them and they haven't done anything yet. But eventually, they know what their nuclear red line is, and the first sign that we've crossed their nuclear red line is going to be a mushroom cloud over over Kyiv or Brussels, or a massive cyber attack on the U.S. And we best not, Trump is really foolish to follow the neocons' advice and, Biden officials' advice to go after Russia like this, because it's not in the U.S. national security interests.
Do you think that Russia and China would go after the United States before they'd hit Russia, or before they'd hit Europe?
It really depends, because up to now, Putin has viewed kind of the UK as kind of the main enemy. They're kind of behind Ukraine the most, and so they would probably be hit first. But now Trump is pinning a target on our backs. If he provides JASSMs and Tomahawks, we become their number one enemy all over again. So all the niceness goes out the window. Putin may still talk nice, but he's going to do what's in Russia's national security interest. And if we're bombing the crap out of their targets, in the Ural Mountains, or something like that, deep strikes, or bombarding Moscow, as Trump, it came out today, I think the New York Post said that President Trump actually asked Zelensky, hey, I want you to bomb Moscow and St. Petersburg. Can you hurry up and do that? I mean, what an idiot. I'm saying this as a Trump supporter. I hate saying bad things about Trump, but I have to be honest. I'm not a blind supporter. I support Trump when he's right. He's doing lots of good stuff, trade-wise, domestic-wise, budget-wise. But when it comes to foreign policy, he's just blowing chunks. And I was really singing his praises. I was saying he's visionary. He's got, his grand strategy is still the best strategy. It's basically what I've been saying for a long time. But he's abandoned it. He's not following it. He's not prioritizing. He's not focusing on China. He's, escalating wars in Europe and the Middle East. And there's existential threats and consequences that could come upon the American people. So that he's making America less safe than we've ever been in our history.
Okay, a couple questions from the audience. And I think this is relevant. John Jonas, I would love to hear what David feels like the U.S. will look like in 10 years.
Well, if we're being honest, I don't think there will be a U.S. I think the second coming is likely to happen in the next 10 years. And so there's a lot of biblical prophecies that need to happen. Of course, I'm doing my utmost to try to save our country. But, there's not going to be any countries left when the Savior comes. There might be some left when he comes, but after he comes, there's going to be, as kind of a Christian, I don't know, whatever you call it, what Main Street Christians call it, if you're a Christian millennial or whatever heck you call it. But basically, there's going to be a millennium, and all of it will basically be one kingdom under God, and things are going to be a lot better. But we all need to repent. I know there's a lot that I need to repent about, and we need to turn back to Jesus. And these are hard times. There's going to come a day when I think World War III is going to come home to the United States, and I'm hoping that day is years away. But the way Trump is pushing it, it could be later this year.
Would I like Christ to be here right now? Yes, but I don't like the pain from what I have read in Revelations that comes between then and him coming back. Right? That's a pain. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of pain. Okay. Another question. Joe from Florida. Mr. Pyne, you stated that President Trump's attack on Iran was a huge mistake that risked U.S. national security. Could you elaborate on the specific consequences of this action and what alternative strategy you would have recommended to prioritize America's interest over those countries that I believe the advantage of the U.S., like Israel and Ukraine? You've said many of those things, but I think it's worth quickly synopsizing again, if you would.
Yeah, so I responded to most of that question earlier in the program,
Right.
But the one part I didn't is what's my alternative national security strategy, and what I call it is assured national survival is what I call my alternate strategy. And basically what it is it's getting away from projecting conventional military power and expeditionary forces across the world. It's cutting our military bases in half, cutting our troop presence as much as possible, I'd want to withdraw from NATO. I'd want to withdraw all of our ground troops minimally. Even if we didn't withdraw from NATO, I'd want to withdraw all of our troops from the Middle East. Maybe Bahrain would be our only military base there. It's an important kind of naval air station. But outside of that, I think we should pull our troops out. I even think we should reduce our troop presence. I think we should get out of Okinawa completely. Okinawa is very close to the Chinese mainland. It's very exposed. All those Marines. I think there's like 47,000, 49,000 Marines that are located there. They get wiped out. So that's too far forward. I'd pull them back. Definitely in Japan itself, in terms of the Japanese main islands, I think we could keep some military bases there, but we want to get away from trying to plan for Taiwan's military defense. We want to, try to have reasonable compromise solution with Taiwan. Some kind of confederation agreement where it's an EU style agreement where nominally they're part of China, but really they have continued self-rule. They have control of their military. They have control of political and economic system. Other than the independence parties would have to be banned, of course, but they'd still be democratic. But they wouldn't be aligned with the U.S. They wouldn't be Western aligned. They'd be aligned with China. That would take the target off their back. They likely would not get invaded, and so to save the Taiwanese people, it'd be it's not a win-win, because they'd be affiliated with China. Which obviously is the most murderous communist terror regime in the world. But in terms of, enhancing U.S. national security, it would be. And so that's my solution for Taiwan with Ukraine. It's very simple. We basically, accept all of Russia's peace terms, except for additional Ukrainian territory. That's where we can draw the line. I think I'm pretty sure that if Trump were to call Putin tomorrow and say, yeah, we accept your terms, except for you don't get any more territory.
Live from Utah's Wasatch Front, the pulse of the Mountain West, with the issues that shape.
Sorry about that, David. I apologize. Not sure what caused it to play. Please forgive me, audience. I'm operating right now without a producer.
Yeah, I used to be a K-Talk host myself without a producer, and it was challenging, to say the least. It wasn't as seamless as your shows have been.
Well, that's because I have Dwayne to help me out. So he had one other question for you, and this does take us a smidgen off topic, but it's still what you are a specialist in. And apparently, Joe knows a little bit about you. He said, John, can you ask Mr. Pyne, an expert who holds position in various organizations, to raise awareness about the risk of EMPs by countries like North Korea? Now, you had mentioned pulling our troops back from Okinawa. But you said leave maybe some of the bases. What does that do for our allies? What should they do? What does that look like for us doing for us? And what does it look like for, in many people's mind, that would mean Japan, you're on your own. Philippines, you're on your own. And then I do think that ties a little bit into EMP risk by North Korea. And then let's go ahead and get into your articles that you put out over the last month.
Well, in terms of South Korea, I think Trump has it right. He's been saying behind the scenes he wants rockets out of South Korea. I think, for a while he was getting close to signing a peace treaty ending the war in Korea, because we're technically still at war with Communist China and North Korea over the Korean War, and have been since 53. So that's a long time to be technically at war with the country. And the same thing happened to Germany, and we were technically at war with Germany from 1941 to 1990 or 91. I guess it was 90 when we signed the peace agreement, allowing for German reunification. So I think that would be a good move. In terms of their security, I mentioned that we would maintain some kind of military presence in the Japanese home islands. I think Japan's really, it's the pillar of what we want defended. We don't want Japan to fall Chinese control. But outside of that, I think we would continue to have a nuclear umbrella over South Korea, where I was born, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. I was born in Seoul at a U.S. military hospital. So it was, technically it was U.S. military base, U.S. territory, but it was a foreign country. But I haven't lived there since I was 2.5 months old, so I forgot all my Korean.
Well, I'll bet. I would be curious how much you actually ever learned, but but whatever you might have learned was more than me, because I have like a big fat 0. Okay, so let's get into a couple of your latest articles. And forgive me, I am pulling those up right now. So you've got 2 articles, one that you wrote June 23rd, and then another one the next day, June 24th. So in 2 days, you were very busy beaver. Trump has just started World War III by bombing Iran's nuclear sites. Let's go ahead and hit a couple of your key points. U.S. strikes in Iran. 3 B-2 stealth bombers dropped 6 bunker buster bombs on the Ford nuclear site, and submarines fired 30 Tomahawk missiles from an undisclosed location roughly 400 miles away. Thoughts there?
Yeah, first of all, I want to clarify what it said. The title says that Trump may have started World War III. What I meant to say is not that he started World War III, but that it could
lead to the start.
If it was handled poorly, which it wasn't, then it could lead to a chain of events that would bring in Russia and China and cause them to, expand aggressions in their theaters and get the U.S. involved in a war that could lead to our destruction. So I did not, when I wrote the article, I did not think that it was World War III.
Right. Sorry if I wasn't clear on that myself. I apologize.
Yeah. So what I did is I outlined, I'm kind of a worst case scenario kind of guy. I inherited that from Dr. Peter Pry, my mentor. Actually was that way before I met him, but he was kind of my mentor from 2018 until his death in 2022. And I think all U.S. military planners need to be that. You have to look at what's the worst case if I attack a country, if I go to war, what's the worst that can happen? Is it destruction? Is it some economic distress? What are the potential costs to U.S. military operation? And in the case of Iran, it was very high. But at the same time, as you see in my latest article, I wrote, I kind of predicted. What I said was, if Trump said that it was a one-off attack, and he told the Iranians that in advance, which he did, and he immediately after the attack, he pressured Israel into a ceasefire, then I said he could get away with it with no real Iranian military response. And that's exactly what happened. He gave Iran 24 to 48 hours notice, allowed them to withdraw all of their nuclear scientists, all of their highly enriched uranium from those 3 sites. Probably not all of their centrifuges, because those are harder to move. But as we know from the DIA report, the battle damage assessment, none of those sites were likely destroyed. Trump is saying they're obliterated. In fact, none of them were destroyed. We just kind of bombed the entrances and collapsed the entrances. So Iran can dig those out. They don't have any personnel down there, but they could dig them out probably within 3 months and restore full operations is what my assessment is. But after that happened, of course, Iran attacked us with 14 missiles. I think at least two of the buildings at our main military base in Qatar were hit, unlike initial reports which said there were no hits. But there were no U.S. personnel damage. So essentially, this is a political. It's a political theater, highly choreographed. Each president, in terms of the president of the United States and the Ayatollah, we were all playing to our hardline supporters. So Trump played to his hardline supporters by looking tough, bombing Iran, but really not doing a lot of damage. We only did moderate damage to their nuclear production capabilities. We didn't actually inflict any damage on their nuclear arsenal. They in turn attacked some buildings, some military housing buildings, and that we need to repair. But no casualties on either side. We both had advance warning. We probably had an agreement where if they didn't fire any missiles at our bombers, it would be a one-off attack. And so this was all. It's all kind of. It's like a fake war. I mean, the war between Israel and Iran was very real. I mean, there were some substantial casualties on both sides. Probably 1,000 dead and wounded on the Iranian side. Some of their top military leaders were assassinated. But in terms of the actual exchange between the U.S. and Iran, it was more for show.
Okay, so the I can't remember where I heard it, on which news organization reported it, but some of the Iranian nuclear specialists that were turning these into taking it from 4%, I believe it was, to 60%, and then taking it to 90%. Some of their specialists were killed. Was that done by Israel?
Yes, it was done by Israel. Israel was we gave them quote unquote exquisite U.S. intelligence, which enabled them to be highly successful in assassinating a number of Iranian nuclear scientists, as well as top Iranian military leaders. I think maybe 10 or 11 major generals or above in terms of their Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and also their main army leaders as well. Basically, I think they're equivalent to their Joint Chiefs of Staff. I even saw a report that the president of Iran was slightly wounded in an Israeli strike. So, and there were threats against the Ayatollah himself. I mean, Trump, he posted at least one post where he said, "Yeah, we know where the Ayatollah is, but we're not going to kill him yet." I mean, really just bombastic, adolescent. You don't talk. Just imagine if we said that about Putin. Hey, we know you are Putin. We got you in our sights. We're not going to kill you yet. How would he respond to that? He might respond with a nuclear missile at DC. Just preemptive strike, just self-defense, right?
Right.
So, so it's not good practice.
Owen Mania released the Epstein files. We've already talked about that in the first hour. We definitely have covered that. So Trump pivots back to America first with new Israel-Iran war ceasefire deal. Now, this was written on June 24th. Where do you feel he stands with that now?
Well, I mean,
and I also want you to mention, so your post that you said President Trump has himself surrounded by a bunch of people, and wanted you to share that.
Yeah, so obviously when he went full bore pro-Israel, America last with the bombings of Iran, I mean that was just really just in your face, like screw you, MAGA conservatives, that he did that, and only 19% of Trump voters supported that at the before it happened. After it happened, I think it was much more even. I think it was actually majority support. And that when something's over and we get off, get off lightly, then it's kind of a rally around the flag.
Moment.
Yeah. So I think that happened, but just think, I mean, 19% support for attacking Iran. He does it anyway. So he's like, screw you. I'm going to do what I want, not what you want. Not what I promised to do. He promised to end the wars, end all of Biden's wars, and stop any new ones from breaking out. And then he starts new ones in Yemen and Iran. And the Yemen war, I think, was, 50 days. And the Iran war he started was just 2 days, but he's getting more and more dangerous. I mean, what's next? A one-day war with Russia? We're going to bomb Moscow or some nuke sites. I mean, I actually had a friend of mine in a national security discussion group of mine, and he's like, hey, if Ukraine can get away with destroying a dozen Russian nuclear bombers, why can't we do the same? Why don't we fly a B-2 and take out, use GBU-57s against their ICBM silos? Obviously, there's, that doesn't make any sense because ICBM silos are hardened against even nuclear strikes. But it just, the whole mentality that that Trump is creating among his supporters, that hey, we can get away with bombing nuclear powers and they're not going to nuke us back. I mean, it's so idiotic, and I just feel duty bound to try to set the record straight that that's really bad policy.
Well, I want to read this tweet you put out. President Trump has surrounded himself. This has to do with Israel, and frankly, I think some of the bad decisions he's making with Ukraine. Trump has himself surrounded by Israel Mossad agents in his own cabinet who are getting him to put Israel first and America last. He needs to fire them all and declare it America's Liberation Day from Israel. I love that statement. I would completely agree with it. I want America first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and 10th. And then we give Israel, I really agree with your opinion, humanitarian supplies. It's time for Israel to start figuring out if there's a way that they can get along with their neighbors instead of being in fight with them all the time. I do think they stir things up. And when they do things like attack the U.S. liberty, now, my question is how much was this a happy-go-lucky thing from Lyndon Johnson? I mean, that would have never have happened without Lyndon Johnson first giving permission and being fine with that, because he said, I want that boat sunk to the bottom. He told that to an admiral who was sending planes off to go and cover the liberty. So I go, how much of that mindset still exists in Israel, and how much of that mindset is he surrounded by in his own cabinet? What are your thoughts?
Well, Israel blackmailed LBJ. LBJ was a philanderer. In a day when being a philanderer wasn't cool. We still had some decent morals back then in the '60s. I think I don't think we didn't know much about JFK's affairs, and when we saw him gallivanting probably with Marilyn Monroe or something, but that that doesn't mean that they're sleeping together. LBJ, he was same. I don't think he raped anyone like JFK and Clinton did, but I mean, he was still sleeping around, and
Whoa,
that
did
could
you
have brought down his
just
brother.
say JFK raped somebody?
Well, there was a 19-year-old, he was, I don't know, 44, 45 at the time. There was a 19-year-old that came in and he just took her to his bedroom and had sex with her. And she said she couldn't resist. She's like, she decided not to resist because he was so strong and forceful that she felt she couldn't.
Wow.
I think she submitted. I mean, she submitted willingly, but I don't think that's something she would have chose. So I call that rape.
Yeah, that is. I had not heard that story. I had not heard that story before.
Yeah, and I'm someone who likes. I can divorce someone's personal life. I mean, obviously, I don't want anyone like that to be our president. But he was a great president in terms of national security, for peace. I think he was assassinated because he was a peace president. So, that's really his worst thing. But LBJ, was the first one that Israel successfully got away with blackmailing. And I wasn't aware of that comment. If he said he wanted that ship sunk, that kind of explains, he wanted the blackmail to end, and that was the price, I guess, that Israel told him he had to pay.
So how is this affecting Trump to have, and who would you say some of those Mossad, do you know who some of those Mossad agents are, or at least have very strong assumptions? I'm going to guess that there's one that happened to work for the former president of used to work for Israel, former president, or actually, did she work for Netanyahu? But who are some of the people that surround him?
Well, I want to be clear that these aren't necessarily, when I say Mossad agent, I use the term loosely, essentially agents of influence, witting or unwitting. So they're all doing Israel's bidding. And to me, maybe the term I used was not fully accurate. So I want to clear that up. Basically, they're Israeli agents, whatever, allies, dupes, agents, I mean, basically FDR was, and I think even Churchill were Soviet dupes. Were they actual paid agents of the communists? Probably not. But in terms of the, Susie Wiles, the chief of staff of the White House, she's a former senior Netanyahu campaign consultant. She was paid to get him reelected, and obviously she did a great job. Trump viewed her as a loyalist, but she's been at the forefront of shutting out Tulsi Gabbard and marginalizing others. I think Pete Hegseth as well, from discussions about bombing Iran, and so she's on the wrong side of the ledger. Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz conspired behind the president's back to get the U.S. to bomb Iran with Netanyahu, and he was fired for it. And then the ironic thing is, less than 2 months later, that's exactly what Trump did. But then we also know that Israel has apparently all of the White House cabinet officials. We don't know if Trump uses it as well, but presumably he does. They use an Israeli intelligence app version of Signal. So this app allows full transcripts for to be printed, but it for the person using it. But it also allows most likely has a back door because it was the founder is a former Israeli intelligence operative.
I can pretty much guarantee it. In fact, when we get on the other side, and the history of the world is shown, I'm going to look back at you and you go, if I'm wrong on that, I'm going to be like, oh, apparently I got that one wrong, because I'm like 99.9%. I'm going to be shocked, and I'm going to give you a look like, boy, I completely blew it.
Yeah. So it basically is Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is reading all of the secret texts between U.S. cabinet officials. He knows exactly what they're saying. He can text them back, his agents, whether it's John Ratcliffe at CIA or Mike Waltz, and say, hey, say this back, or use this argument, or give him, here's an intelligence assessment that's completely fabricated to rebut that by Israel. And, so he can easily, and he did, he manipulated the president of the United States. And, I don't, as an, flag waving American patriot, I don't think it's a good thing for even supposed allies to be, allied leaders to be manipulating the president of the United States to do their bidding, at least not when it flies in opposition to U.S. national security interests and creates much greater risks that are potentially existential to the American people.
I would concur. I would greatly concur. What is the key to be stopping this?
I think President Trump needs to fire all these people. I'm actually writing an article. I wrote 12 pages of it so far. Hopefully I'll publish it later this week. But basically, the title is how Trump's foreign policy was hijacked by the deep state neocons, and it lists all the people: Susie Wiles, Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, John Ratcliffe at CIA, General Kellogg, Keith Kellogg, who's a special envoy to Ukraine, General Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Kirill at CENTCOM. So those are pretty much the 7 or so people that have really swayed Trump to go in a neocon deep state direction. And Kirill is already going out the door. I don't think we necessarily need to replace the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but I would say all the other ones need to go. Waltz, Rubio, Wiles, and Ratcliffe, particularly Kellogg, all those need to go. Replace them with.
Would you get rid of Pete Hegseth?
No. Pete Hegseth is reportedly behind the scenes. He's on our side. He's arguing against bombing Iran. He's probably arguing against giving Ukraine more weapons, wanting to keep them for the U.S. military. So he's on our side. Tulsi Gabbard's on our side. J.D. Vance. Reportedly, J.D. Vance is being marginalized as vice president, and Trump was asked, who should replace him when he finishes his second term, and he basically looked at Rubio and smiled and said, "Well, Rubio's pretty good." So Rubio's the ringleader at this point. It used to be Mike Waltz, but Mike Waltz got demoted, and so Marco Rubio is now the Henry Kissinger of Trump world. He's really Trump's go-to guy on all things foreign policy and probably national security policy as well. And so, little Marco, who would have thought? If you watch those 2015 and 16 presidential debates when Rubio was savaging Trump mercilessly, and he was giving him back as good as he got, but now they're besties. So and unfortunately Rubio's America last guy, neocon.
Well, at the very beginning, Rubio was doing some good things, and if I remember correctly, you and I had the discussion is, okay, so is he doing good things right now to get in Donald Trump's graces to just wind up being as bad as we think he may be? Because you and I were both not happy. If I remember correctly, let me rephrase that. I don't necessarily want to put words in your mouth, but if I remember correctly, when you and I first talked about Mark Rubio getting in, I was really concerned about that. And I think you agreed with that.
Yeah, no, I was, I wrote an article on November 13th entitled Return of the Neocons, and Waltz and Rubio were my number one targets in terms of worries that these are the guys who are going to sabotage the Trump Ukraine policy, and get us in a potential war with Russia. So now Rubio, it would be one thing if Trump had fired Mike Waltz and replaced him with someone good, like, his current deputy national security advisor is J.D. Vance's former national security policy guy. And so, if we had him as national security advisor, just be basically another J.D. Vance force multiplier for the America First conservative foreign policy side. But we got Rubio. Rubio's interim national security advisor, and Trump said that he would stay that for 6 months, and we're less than 2 months into that. So, it's a bad situation. But ultimately, personnel is policy, as the saying goes, and so you appoint the wrong people, you get the wrong policies, and that's what happened in the first administration, and sadly, it's what's happening now as well.
Well, what else do you want us to take away from this discussion? We're at 5:40. What other things would you like to share with the audience? What other key thoughts do you want to share that they need to be looking out for and watching for, and maybe calling their congressman about, or at least, it seems like with the Epstein situation, Donald Trump got the message. I think if we're loud enough, I think there were a fair number of people, and he was surprised with how many people were not for the bombing of Iran. What do you want our audience to think, and what would you suggest they do?
Well, I mean, number one, I think it's important that, you can be a Trump supporter, but oppose him on one or two key issues. The great thing about the conservatives is we're independent thinkers, or at least the true conservatives are. There's also the Trump sycophants. I mean, you can be a sycophant for anyone, but
Right.
I've seen people defend Trump on the craziest issues. Like the Epstein files. I mean, that's one example. I don't think that's the craziest, but just when he does stupid stuff. Most of the stuff that Trump does, I like, but on some important stuff, foreign policy wise, he's doing a bad job. He's mimicking Biden, John McCain, George W. Bush, all the bad people. And then he's trying to one up them. Instead of being a peace president, he's trying to be a war president. So I think it's really important that, we keep our principles, just like as Christians, we keep biblical values, and we champion the Lord's commandments and the gospel of Jesus Christ. But when it comes to conservative ideals, if Trump decided to be pro-abortion tomorrow, do we support that? I don't think so. So,
No.
I would be the first out the door if in terms of his support base. If he takes us to nuclear war, it's not going to matter. No one's going to care if he's Republican or Democrat, or if you're a Trump supporter or not. It's going to hurt us all equally. I think it's important that your viewers contact members of Congress and tell them to, fight hard to vote against the Trump weapons packages that are been going on in Congress. There was a $300 million one, and there's also a $500 million one that I think that one's still I'm not sure if that one's passed yet. The situation with the current announcement from today is that Trump is going to have, he's going to transfer those weapon systems from other countries, and then he's going to build, we're going to build some more to replenish their Patriots. But we've already diminished our weapon stockpiles to an unacceptable extent, and
that's a huge concern.
Yeah, because we can't even fight a war against Russia or China, let alone win one. Previous to all these wars breaking out, I think we were, I think it was in 2023, just a year after the Ukraine war broke out, and there was a congressional war game that said that we would run out of long-range precision strike munitions, including air defense interceptors, within 7 days of fighting China with intense combat operations. So we can fight a 7-day war against China. Whoopie-doo. What's going to happen when we run out? They're going to run all over us, so we'll have to withdraw the Pacific Fleet to Pearl Harbor, and then they're going to take over all of our allies. So, we really can't afford to mess around. And same thing with regards to Russia. We would run out of, all of NATO would run out of most weapon systems within 2 weeks of the war starting. And, basically they have a military on paper, but if you don't build the weapon systems and munitions, what's the point of having a gun if you have no ammo? And that's kind of the situation that we're in.
In a way, if you got to have a gun or you've got to have ammo, I'd rather have ammo. You can figure out a way to fire that ammo. Maybe not very accurately, but you can figure out a way to fire it. So, okay. So one of the things you've talked about is figuring out some type of peace. And I want you to restate, how do we, what are your thoughts on Russia, China, and separating the two of them? I think it was pretty much the beginning of our conversation. So I know that there's a lot of people that have come in. I'm sure there's been some people that left, but there's a number of new people that have come in that didn't hear your comments on what we can do. Because right now, China, Xi and Putin, now I trust neither. I still see Putin as I don't believe I believe he's as Christian pretty much as he might be only slightly more Christian than Xi because he's willing to wear a cross and lie to people. That's basically my opinion of Putin. I don't believe that. But the bottom line is, what can we do to make sure that the two of them aren't together and destroy BRICS and break that up as much as possible? Or is that even worth doing?
That's a great question. That's a question that Vivek Ramaswamy asked me in his headquarters office in June 2023 when I briefed him on my Ukraine war peace plan. And the answer is there's a lot we can do. There's a heck of a lot we can do. We can so obviously the key thing we need to do is to settle the war in Ukraine on terms minimally acceptable to Russia. And they've said what their terms are, and we can tweak them. I've published probably half a dozen, maybe 8 to 10, different peace plans with different tweaks, and some of them I've updated, and some I left in the original format. But that's why Vivek asked me to join his team, is because I was the only one that had a detailed plan for how to end the war in Ukraine diplomatically. But essentially, as I mentioned, Russia's insisting on all of the 5 regions. Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk being the 4 frontline regions. They have all of Luhansk already, so it's really just the 3 regions that they want to have all of. And I think it's I calculated it as another 3.5% of Ukrainian territory. So it's the territory they're asking for, in addition to what they have, is a little smaller than Crimea. It's not a huge area, but it's a big ask politically for Trump, because it would be so much easier for him to sell a peace agreement and say, hey, I stopped the Russians from taking even one additional square inch of Ukrainian territory, versus, I had to give them another Crimea-sized chunk of territory and, everything else they asked for. So there was a report in the Financial Times that said that Russia would be willing to accept a peace deal with no additional Ukrainian territory, basically, if we accepted their other terms. And their other terms are pretty reasonable. It's nothing too major. Other than downsizing the Ukrainian military, they would allow Zelensky to remain in power, provided he won a free election, which we know he'd be guaranteed to lose unless he stole it. He's a corrupt dictator. He kills his political opponents, just like Russian leaders have done. So that's something. In terms of peacekeepers, it would be be Chinese and Brazilians. And actually, the Trump administration apparently was wide open to that. They didn't really care who the peacekeepers were. So that's basically, it was BRICS nations, member states that Russia said they would be fine with as peacekeepers. But in terms of weapon systems, they couldn't have weapons missiles that range more than 40 kilometers, which I think is about 26 miles or 24 miles actually. So pretty short range, but basically all the defensive weapon systems they would need for legitimate self-defense. They could have a military that was 1 million strong, but only 100,000, 150,000 active duty troops, so a little bit smaller than what they had before the war, as little as 50% of what they had before the war. But then they could mobilize, 800,000, 850,000 reservists and have a military as big as they have right now. Well, actually much bigger, because their military has been destroyed. The Russians have killed or wounded 2 million Ukrainian troops, according to my sources. Suffered a casualty rate of over 6 times as many as the Russians have suffered. But it would be no NATO, and basically, what people don't realize is that the security of Ukraine doesn't rest on the U.S. It doesn't rest on NATO. There's only one country in the world that can guarantee their security, and it's the Russian Federation. How do I know that? Because for 14 years, Putin didn't lay a finger on them, because they stayed friends with Russia. As soon as they started pursuing the NATO membership situation, they overthrew their government. Their pro-Russian government replaced it with someone who was very anti-Russian, handpicked U.S. puppet prime minister. Then that's when Russia, started invading Ukraine in terms of Crimea. And then, of course, with the Zelensky's insistence on refusing to implement the Minsk agreements, refusing to return to Ukrainian neutrality, he changed the constitution. Actually, I think it was maybe it was his predecessor Petrochenko that changed it to be mandate Ukraine's quest for NATO membership. But just some basic things like that. And of course, protecting Russian minorities, Russian language, things that wouldn't be ground changing for Ukrainians. It basically just be turning the page back to the pre-2014 status quo. And that's really all Russia wants. And it used to be, initially they wanted to give all Ukraine's territory back except for Crimea. And now it's going to be a lot less. Russia controls 19% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory. But in terms of everything else, Ukraine would be guaranteed peace. They could have the treaty of friendship they had with Russia. And if we do that and we end all sanctions on Russia, then we can invest in Russia. We can give them a sphere of influence in their backyard in the former Soviet Union, and so we peel them off from China economically. They no longer feel threatened by us. So they're not aiming, they're not going to threaten us with nukes or invasion or, in terms of NATO. And we'd have, of course, NATO could go in the opposite direction. So there could still be tensions between them and NATO, but we don't really care about NATO, because NATO could fall tomorrow, or I don't mean fall, but if they were destroyed, the U.S. could still survive. But if we pressure them, if we pressure our NATO allies to be friendly to Russia, but if we pressure them enough in terms of threatening troop withdrawals or even a full exit, U.S. exit from NATO, I think they're going to march in line. Because they can't really feel secure on their own. So if we did all that, we shared technology, maybe missile defense technology, maybe had some joint military exercises. I mean, how cool would that? U.S. and Russian troops, U.S. and Russian ships, instead of seeing Russian and Chinese troops and ships and aircraft, maybe have our own joint military exercises. I mean, it would completely revolutionize the this international order in our favor, because right now we have Russia and China, two nuclear superpowers against one. Who's going to win a war? I mean, it's basic math. They have way more nukes than we do. They have way more troops than we do. They have a much stronger, more massive industrial base. China can build ship tonnage 370 times more than we can. I mean, it's insane. Just the imbalance. Even in technology, we're technologically overmatched in a lot of areas where we didn't used to be.
Okay, so 2 points that I think you said. Russia's was stated that they were willing to control only 3.5% of now, I guess, NATO recognized territory. But you said they're in control of right now, so that's what they might settle for. They're currently in control of about 19% of Ukrainian territory. So that Trump could come out and declare himself the winner because he got Putin to give up a bunch of the land if Putin would be willing to do it. Now, here's my question on that 3.5%. Is that like the most valuable part of Ukraine?
No, so that's not what I said, or that's not what I meant to imply. So they have control of 19% they've annexed 19% of Ukraine. The additional area of Ukraine that they want to annex or want to control is 3.5%. So the total, it would be the combined total of 22.6%. Let's see. No, it'd be 22.3% that they would control that I calculated. So that's less than a quarter of Ukraine. It's a little over a fifth of Ukraine. Not a whole lot more than they control right now. And that's like their bottom line. Like they're like, we're done. We'll have permanent peace with Ukraine. We'll never attack them again. As long as NATO stays out, Ukraine can be independent. We'll have great economic agreements and relations with them and, ensure their security. So that's like the worst case scenario right now. But they're saying that if we don't accept those terms, they're going to go for an additional 4 Ukrainian oblasts, and that's going to reduce the amount of Ukrainian territory to I think it's 58%, 57% is what they would have left, and then the Russians would have nearly half. So basically, almost all of Ukraine. I mean, it's not the same area, but it's an equivalent area of all of Ukraine, south and east of the Dnipro River is essentially what Russia would control and annex. So, why are we wanting to risk that? Why is Zelensky wanting to risk that? We know why he's willing to risk it, because if he if he ends the war, he has to submit to a democratic election, which he's sure to lose. And then they're going to throw him in prison. He'll have to go in exile because he's been so corrupt. He's stole hundreds of millions of dollars from Ukrainians and from, U.S. taxpayers supplied money. So he's going to be a fugitive. He'd have to retire and, whatever, live in his mansions in Italy or Florida or Dubai or wherever the heck he has this.
If I was Zelensky, I'd work that deal right now. I'd say, let's be done with this. Because he might. And the reason why I say why would I do that if I was him? Well, come on, talk with John. You're crazy. He's the president right now. The bottom line is they'll whack that guy. Either side is willing to whack that guy. And get rid of them, especially I believe people in NATO would be more than fine to get rid of them for an advantage. So I'd be like, if I was him, I'd start working that right now. I'd work that peace advantage, and maybe the reason why he hasn't is because he's been told the military-industrial complex doesn't want this to end, and so therefore you're going to do what you're told.
Well, I was asked this question 3 years ago on a different program. I think was the Stu Peters show. And he's like, do you think that Zelensky's a U.S. puppet? And I said, no, I think Biden's a Zelensky puppet, because Biden's doing Zelensky's bidding. It's not the opposite. It's really, and sadly, now Trump's in the same situation. I mean, do I think he's literally a Zelensky puppet? No, but I think he's doing exactly what Zelensky's telling him to do. And it's not direct. He's not like, okay, you got to do this, Trump. It's like, let's talk to Mark Rutte, Secretary of General of NATO. He kisses your butt all the time, so you do whatever he says, and that's how Trump gets manipulated. It's just a sad situation. I want to see a strong president. Trump was really strong. It was up until the end of April He was really strong. You know, he was like, I'm not going to be pushed around. I'm not going to let Zelensky push me around. We saw what happened in February 28th in the Oval Office. He pushed, you know, he initially let Zelensky walk all over him, call him a Putin puppet, and then J.D. Vance stuck up for him. And, you know, he set him straight, you know, and everyone, even Lindsey Graham was like, I think Zelensky might need to resign. Those are the good old days. I wish we could bring them back. You know, wish Trump even cut off all aid except for defensive intelligence from March 4th to March 11th. And that was what I was saying was the key to ending the war, is you cut off all U.S. aid to Ukraine, and they're forced to make peace with Russia. And
Yeah.
Cut off Starlink access too, but even the threat of a cutoff of Starlink would force Zelensky to accept the deal. And instead, you know, after it's been 5.5+ months, almost 6 months, 6 months next week that Trump's been in office, he hasn't succeeded in getting Zelensky to make one single concession on the road to peace with Russia. He signed an agreement, a minerals agreement, which had all of Zelensky's terms and none of Trump's. You know, so he's been, when it comes to Ukraine, he's been a colossal failure. You know, he's appeased Zelensky, he's appeased EU Politburo leaders. He hasn't put the U.S. first. He did temporarily, but now, you know, he ended up caving, and he's showing weakness. You know, you can, the neocons are always talking about, oh, you can't show weakness to dictators. Well, Zelensky's a dictator. He's a murderous dictator. Has he invaded countries? No. But you're showing weakness to dictators. They're just going to keep telling you what to do. They're going to keep manipulating you. You know, that's not a good situation for the president of the United States. The president of the leader of the free world, you know, should not be manipulated by Netanyahu or Zelensky, you know, acting against U.S. national security interests, putting American lives on the line, putting our countrymen at greater risk of death and destruction than they've ever been in U.S. history. And that's what Trump's doing, you know. But, you know, the thing is, he can change. He has the freedom. He's the president of the United States. He could fire all these people in a hot minute and put America first, and, you know, start making America safe and secure again. Do I think he's going to do it? I think that's very unlikely. I'm very worried about the direction he's taking us in.
Well, David Pyne, I'm going to say thanks for joining us. We've hit 6 o'clock, and so I appreciate you being here. David, would you please tell people how they can find out more about you and what you're putting out and your books to come out? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be on your show once a month, and we always have great discussions. I think you're a great patriot. But in terms of my book, there has been a delay. It's a 6-month delay, so probably won't come out until end of the year, late December, or probably New Year. But where you want to go to find out more about what I'm saying is, you know, the Real War website. It's my Substack site. It's at dpyne.substack.com. Once again, dpyne.substack.com. And then my X handle is at America First Con. Again, Con for conservative.
And he puts out great stuff.
Ran out of space. But that's where I do my daily updates, and then my bi-monthly plus updates are on my website. So check me out.
Well, folks, he's well worth the time spending on. I go to his Twitter often, and I appreciate what he has to share. If you want some insight on what's happening around the world, I think that's the place, one of the key places to go. So, David Pyne of your Substack, dpyne. So it's dpyne.substack.com. Thank you so much for joining us. Or America First Con, not .con, America First Con on X. Thanks for joining us today. Wish you the best, and I hope you have a great month, and we'll see you next month. Folks, we'll see you in 2 weeks. So